At Tango Gameworks, a title known as Evil Within, which was announced at last year's E3, is still being worked on today, and set to be released in 2014. But the story is not about Evil Within or Tango Gameworks. The story is about the man who is directing the entire project, the man known as Shinji Mikami. Shinji Mikami is considered by many to be the father of survival horror. The mind behind Resident Evil and Devil May Cry, Shinji Mikami is also considered one of the greatest video game developers of all time. So now we take you to the past, and into the present, and then later into the future as we take a look at a career retrospective of one of video games' most important developers and the father of survival horror, Shinji Mikami. Shinji Mikami graduated from the Faculty of Commerce at Doshisha University, and then was hired by Capcom in 1990. Capcom, a Japanese video game development company, was already famous for such hits as Ghosts 'n Goblins, Mega Man, and fighting game legend Street Fighter. In his early years, Mikami developed his first game, a quiz game for Nintendo's Game Boy, named Capcom Quiz, Hatana no Deboken. The game was only released in Japan, and received good reception. After his first title, Mikami went to work on 3 Disney-based games, Who Framed Roger Rabbit for the Game Boy, along with Aladdin and Goof Troop for the Super Nintendo. Aladdin would become his first hit, selling over 1.75 million units worldwide. Mikami also worked on an F1 racing title, later on cancelled after 8 months of development. But Mikami was soon to find his mountain of gold with his next project that would combine both horror and adventure. After the release of Goof Troop, Mikami began work on a horror-themed adventure game that would be set in a mansion and loosely based on the Japanese horror movie game Sweet Home. The game was Biohazard, but later changed to Resident Evil in North America due to another game having the same title and the New York City hardcore punk band that used Biohazard as their name. Therefore, Capcom US promoted the game as Resident Evil to stick out amongst the crowd. The game was released on the 22nd of March 1996 for both Sony's PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. The game would garner rave reviews from both critics and fans alike, captivated by the sheer environment and story between the cast of characters. The game would feature a creepy mansion filled with flesh-eating zombies, dogs, and other ghastly creatures based off of George Romero's Dead movies, plus a cast of characters having no idea what they were getting into and what they were about to face. The story centered on the STARS unit of the Raccoon City Police Department. STARS stood for Special Tactics and Rescue Squad. Their assignment was to investigate a series of disappearances in the forest outside of Raccoon City, plus the missing STARS members of Bravo Squad. The cast of characters included Chris Redfield, a former U.S. Air Force pilot and marksman, Jill Valentine, a former member of the Delta Force training program, Barry Burton, another former airman who served in the same unit as Chris did in the Air Force, plus a close friend with Chris, and Albert Wesker, leader of the Star Squad and a secret double agent. The game follows the 2 stories of both Chris and Jill, as both of them uncover the mystery of the mansion and its monsters, eventually discovering that the pharmaceutical company Umbrella was behind the outbreak of a mysterious virus known as the T-Virus, inside the mansion and the surrounding areas. As the story progresses, you either save Rebecca Chambers, the medic and the last surviving member of Bravo Squad if you're Chris, or you are consistently saved and aided by Barry if you are Jill. You will also discover the different members of Bravo Squad dead, dying, or about to die. Eventually, the player discovers that Albert Wesker is a member of Umbrella Corporation and plans to betray you. Finally, once the player reaches the end, he or she has to face the final boss, a giant monster known as a tyrant. Once he is defeated, the player has successfully won and survived the mission. The players enjoyed playing both as Jill or Chris, and adapting to the consistent twists and turns throughout the mansion, including puzzles and item scavenging. The game also featured 3D polygonal graphics, still a widely advanced developmental capability for 1996. The well-immersed environment enhanced its replay value, plus the 2 different dynamics of Chris and Jill helped create a sense of care from the player of what happened to them. Also, aiding to the game's cause was consistent play, Players moved along with the D-pad and performed actions with the X button on PlayStation and the A button on the Saturn. The game was the first of its kind on a platform other than the PC. It was considered the first survival horror game in history, and where other games failed to grab the player's attention, this game did not. This new style of gameplay kept people coming back for more. It only took a couple of months for Capcom to realize that they had a hit on their hands, and that Shinji Mikami was well on his way to superstardom amongst the gaming community. With Resident Evil's popularity rising, other versions of the game were released, such as Resident Evil the Director's Cut, and a second Director's Cut known as the DualShock version were released to North America, containing material that was cut from the initial release. The new content included a graphic death scene from the opening cinematic, and a clip of Chris smoking a cigarette during the character introduction. After selling over 3.88 million worldwide, Mikami was preparing to release a sequel to their newfound success. After the release of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami soon began working on a sequel in 1995, and was also promoted from planner to producer, giving him more creative control and freedom of his vision. This time, the horror would be taken out of the spooky mansion and into Raccoon City itself. Shinji Mikami began development on Resident Evil 2 in 1995, and this time the game would be based on two characters trapped within the confines of Raccoon City. The characters were Leon S. Kennedy, a rookie fresh out of the police academy, recently hired by the Raccoon City Police Department and just arriving for his first day on the job, and Claire Redfield, the younger sister of Chris. Once again, the player could choose to play as one of two characters, this time being Leon or Claire. Differences in the storyline continued, this time with two particular different situations. Both Leon and Claire's stories would start out the same, and some similar intricacies, but they would differ in more key details, such as Sherry Birkin, the young daughter of William and Annette Birkin, the couple that created the G-Virus, whom Claire watches out for during her story. While Leon's story, the more difficult of the two, would be contacted by Ada Wong, an agent for Umbrella, sent to recover the G-Virus. The story would be that a viral outbreak caused by rats carrying the disease would hit Raccoon City and cause massive chaos. While the city tore itself to pieces, the cause of the outbreak is unknown. During the story, while playing as either Leon or Claire, the player figures out what caused the outbreak. Plus, the player tries to consistently survive the death traps all around the Raccoon City Police Station, sewer system, and Umbrella's secret underground laboratory. With a more in-depth storyline and similar gameplay, Resident Evil 2 was consistent in style, texture, and graphics, which made it easier for the fans to grow attachment to Capcom's second installment in the series. Resident Evil 2 was released on January 22, 1998 to a bloodthirsty fanbase. The second game introduced fans not only to the new cast, but also to new monsters, including Lickers and Plant 42s. With all new challenges and enemies, Resident Evil 2 would go on to sell over 4.96 million units worldwide, surpassing its predecessor. With the outstanding success of Resident Evil 2, Capcom would release Resident Evil 2 DualShock Edition, which would go on to sell 1.2 million units worldwide. Shinji Mikami had two hits on his hands, and now with Capcom backing him 100%, he was prepared to write the next chapter in the Resident Evil saga.